Bibliophiles of the internet. My name is Adriana and today I want to have a chat with you guys about my personal reading history. I believe the first booktuber who did this kind of video was Climbing the Stacks, and I've also seen other wonderful booktubers do it as well, like Helene from Helene Jeppesen and Sam from Novels and Nonsense. All of the videos from those booktubers who I mentioned will be linked in the description down below, so be sure to check those out when you have some time. I know this is a different type of video where I'll just be talking to you and I'll be telling you about my roots as a reader and my journey as a reader, but I really want to give you all the opportunity to understand me better as a person and as a reader. And maybe you'll get a clearer picture of how I became the reading goddess that you see in front of you. I'm not a reading goddess, I'm just a girl. I hate to break it to you. So with all of that said, let's begin and let's take a little trip back in time. A lot of people on BookTube contribute their love of reading to series like Twilight, but my reading journey starts way before series like Twilight, Harry Potter, the series of unfortunate events. My journey starts in picture books. I really do contribute my love of reading now as an adult to my parents because they were both educators and they both placed a strong emphasis on our early education before we even got to school, before we even went to preschool. My mom taught us the alphabet and how to spell and how to read very simple books very early on in life. So picture books are where it all really began for me, with classics like Dr. Seuss, The Berenstain Bears, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, and this gem right here, The Seven Silly Eaters, which I still have. Now we transition into the elementary school years. I was a very naturally gifted reader, and I don't know how they find these things out, but in first grade, I was separated from the class along with another boy into this advanced reading group. Those were some really off-kilter air quotes. Every single time it was time for the class to do some sort of spelling or writing activity, he and I would be separated out. We'd go to a different section of the classroom and we'd do our own activities. Again, I don't know why. I don't remember doing some kind of test or anything. I have no idea how they discovered they had a reading goddess in their presence. But that was a thing, and that literally separated me from the other children at a very young age. In elementary school, I got into chapter books like the Magic Treehouse series by Mary Pope Osborne and the Junie B. Jones series by Barbara Park. These are the only two that I have on my shelf today, but trust me when I say I read and collected every single book in both of these series. And then in third grade, there was a fateful day, Read Across America Day. For those of you who don't know, Read Across America Day is sort of an academically sanctioned holiday that I think happens around March every single year. On Read Across America Day, parents volunteer to come into the classroom and to read stories to the students. More often than not, they do bring Dr. Seuss books, which is great, or they bring picture books, but in third grade, something different happened. A woman who I will never forget her name, Mrs. Briones, brought in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling. That fateful day, she read the first chapter of the first Harry Potter book, and my life changed. And also in elementary school, kind of around the same time, I introduced myself to the series of unfortunate events by Lemony Snicket. And then came middle school, which on a daily basis, I like to pretend never happened. But it was during middle school that my sister discovered the Princess Diaries series by Meg Cabot, and she shared her books with me, and we bonded over the feels at that young, tender age. It wasn't just the Princess Diaries, but Meg Cabot in general, who I feel like I discovered somewhere around middle school. Again, not entirely sure because we didn't have Goodreads back then, but I was obsessed with Meg Cabot books like Princess Diaries, All-American Girl, Avalon High, Teen Idol, stuff like that. And then high school happened, and I still didn't identify as a reader at this point. I read a lot in my free time, and I did have a pretty respectable collection in a little armoire at the time. But in high school, I still didn't really see it as anything more than a hobby. It was kind of something to hide because no one else was a reader, and I didn't feel like I could relate to anybody. It was something that made me a little bit weird and different, but I did really enjoy it. So when I was in high school, I did a lot of rereading. I mean, a lot of rereading. And that's because I didn't have the means to buy new books. My parents never gave me an allowance, I didn't have a job, and even though occasionally they would take me to like Borders and allow me to get a single book, it wasn't that often. So I read the books in my collection, and then I read them again, and then I read them again. It was around this time that I discovered Sarah Dessen, who kind of writes a more complex, more emotional contemporary YA narrative. I picked up Just Listen on a whim because of the cover, because of the premise, because this is a girl listening to her MP3 player, and I really identified with music because by this time I was a musician. So music had affected my life and reading had affected my life, so this just seemed like it made sense, and it was amazing. So I really do feel like Sarah Dessen, along with favorite authors like Meg Cabot, were my gateway into YA. And then while I was still in high school, I did have a group of friends who were really into reading like I was. And we kind of began this impromptu, informal book club at our lunch table. And together we read such gems as Twilight and the Perfect Chemistry series, both of which I despise with all of my heart now. And it was around this time that I started rediscovering the library, which I kind of forgot to mention earlier that the library was a huge part of my life growing up. My mom signed us all up for library cards when we were just like toddlers, before we were even in school, and she took us on trips to the library all the freaking time, especially during the summer. But from the time in middle school to early high school, I was very disconnected with my library, as in I didn't use it at all. But when I was a senior in high school, I started surreptitiously using the library again because I had 2 free periods at the end of the day, and the library was attached to the school, so I would go into the library. I didn't sign up again for a card for a while. I just started going back to the library every 5th and 6th period at the end of my day and taking books off the shelf and reading them and then putting them back. It was around this time that I discovered such literary gems as The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Chbosky, which again I feel upped my reading game and took me to another level. I have this very vivid memory of my senior year when I was reading this book in the library. I was kind of reading it in the back, kind of hiding myself, and one of my friends from band, this guy from the drum line, saw me and he stopped and he pointed at The Perks of Being a Wallflower and he was like, "That's a damn good book." And after he walked away, I feel like that was one of the pivotal moments in my life where I realized you could connect with someone on such an emotional level because you both read the same book. And I think that's because I never pictured this guy from Drumline reading a book like this. And when I realized that he had, and that it had affected him the same way it was affecting me, that was just a moment where everything changed. And now we move into a more complicated phase of my life, which is college. I have no idea what happened. I went book crazy. There was a desperation and a hunger to the way that I was reading. I could not read books fast enough. I couldn't read enough books. At this point in my life, reading was a huge part of my self-identity. And not only was I reading books because I really enjoyed them, obviously I read books because they're fun and I love reading books, but because I needed to read. There was a part of me that couldn't exist without reading. That part's still huge, obviously. And it was at this time that I really started digging my heels into the fantasy genre. I don't know why. I just realized that I really loved it and I hadn't read enough of it by far, so I started reading things like The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien and also A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. But then I read a book called Finnegan of the Rock by Melina Marchetta, which again completely changed my world, because here was an amazing, well-crafted, rich, vivid, YA, epic fantasy that was just everything I never knew I needed. And after that, the possibilities were endless, because by this time I had discovered Goodreads, which really helped me read books that were similar to the books that I already loved. And even though I hadn't started making videos yet, I had discovered BookTube, and that really helped because I got a lot of really eclectic recommendations and I listened to them all. So even though this video is probably obscenely long and you want me to shut the hell up already, I want to talk a little bit about how reading affected my career path, what major I'm in, and just how it has completely changed the direction of my life. When I first got to college, I avoided declaring an English major like the plague. Everyone in my family saw that I loved reading, and so they were like, oh my God, are you gonna be an English major? You should be a teacher. And that is like the opposite of what I want to do with my life. My parents are educators. I don't have that in me. It's not my passion. So very early on, I met that common misconception that English majors can only be teachers, and that scared me away. So the result of that was that I tried out a bunch of different things and took a bunch of different classes. Like I tried psychology classes, sociology classes, communications classes, which I was good at all of them, but none of them were really what I wanted to do. At this point in my life, I was extremely desperate to find a major, to find a passion, to find a career that would be very practical. I wanted to have a major where I could graduate and then there would be jobs in my field that were in high demand, and then I would get a job and I would transition into the workforce and everything would be set. I wanted something stable because English majors and creative writing majors, we're just crazy because there's nothing guaranteed at the end of the line. So I ended up making this huge mistake, and I had a very, very brief stint in culinary school, like the briefest of stints, as in I left the school on the first day of classes. It was a brief stint. That's like a whole different story within itself. Worst mistake of my life. I regretted it so much, and I went back to the college that I graduated from, and I kind of unofficially declared an English major. So then I started taking some English classes so that I could transfer to a different university, and a result of that was I started taking some creative writing classes as electives. And that, my friends, was a huge turning point in my life. I had never, ever been more happy than when I first enrolled in those first two creative writing classes. These two seemingly different parts of my life just suddenly fit together and made complete sense. I realized why I had been drawn to reading over my entire life, and why reading was such a huge part of my life, and why I felt this intense desperation to read more books and to expose myself to as many stories as humanly possible, because I wanted to tell them. So now more than ever before, I have thrown myself wholeheartedly and enthusiastically into my reading, because it's me, it's my life, it's my dream, it's everything that I've ever been and everything that I ever want to be. And if you've ever wondered why I read so much, why I make time outside of required reading that I have to do for school to read for myself, it's because I'm educating myself as a writer, and because I'm taking inspiration from all of these amazing authors whose work you can see displayed behind me. And if you were to ask any of these authors or any of your favorite authors where they started, all great authors start as great readers. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. I'm sure this video is very long, but I just really wanted to let you guys get to know me better as a person and as a reader. Maybe you understand me a little bit better now. So in the comments down below, please feel free to share a little bit of your reading history. I'd love to hear where you started from. And I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will catch you on the flip side of the page. Bye.